Okay, I'm gonna try and teach it a round two here on loops conceptually. And so I'm trying to talk about loops in a way that I feel like I wanted to hear people talk about loops that I just never did see when I was actually starting to learn. So we'll see if it helps anybody. If you don't understand what loops are, this is my attempt to explain it to you. So you have to imagine that you are taking on the job of the Python interpreter. Like when you hit run on a Python program, it's executing your code, right? And you need to take on that job. So you're going to execute the code now, you're going to be the Python interpreter. And so your instructions, these are like human readable instructions for you. You've been told to read a page. After each sentence, you're supposed to complete the task described. So it's in this example, if I gave you a page, like you can only see the topmost line, and everything under it, you're assuming there's data there, but you can't see it yet. So if the sentence one was to describe Susan or somebody, you have to imagine this is somebody you don't know. This is Susan, that. They have to know that exact person's name, that exact human. And if you don't, then you can't describe them. So you have effectively thrown an error of sorts. You don't know how to describe this person. You don't have that information, and that is a good example for the fact that like your Python program is going in order. So you have to be cognizant. You have to be paying attention to the order that you put things in. The same way that you can't describe Susan if you haven't already been described Susan. Your Python program is going to have a hard time printing a variable for you that you haven't declared for it ahead of time up here, up above where it's trying to print out for you. Okay, so if, however, you've been given the information on that page in a different order, you might not have had the error. If in fact you don't know, but Susan had been described in detail on the next line, but you didn't look there because that's exactly how Python works. Like it's not looking below; it's just looking from the top first. It's just working its way down the same way that you read a page in a book. Um, yeah, top to bottom, left to right. So then this is your loop to complete as a human being. You've got a bucket called this bucket. And this is a whole big analogy for loops. So just kind of turn your brain all the way up to full power and just try to absorb this analogy. Um, you've got a bucket that's called this bucket. And this bucket has three items in it. So you can see over here, I've named it this bucket, and I could name it whatever I want, but I've named it this underscore bucket, and I've made it equal to a list of three items. And if you're super brand new to Python, anything inside of two square brackets like that is a list. So you could go one, two, three, or let's see, you can do the strings A, B, etc. So you can put things inside of these and make lists, separated comma lists or comma separated lists. And this bucket has three items: apple, apple, and apple. And these could be anything. We can change one to orange because it really is just this for this particular example. We just care that how many items are in the bucket. It's not really about what's in the bucket. It's about how many things are in there. So then we come down here, and this is your task to complete as a human Python program or interpreter, really. So for every item in this bucket, you're supposed to say, I represent an item in the bucket. My existence is proof of at least one thing in that bucket. And that's so if you were to do this in order, you're looking at the bucket, you have your instructions. So you know for everything in the bucket, I'm supposed to say this. Okay, whatever. So then you go up here and you say, okay, so you see that one, you say, okay, I represent an item in the bucket. And you go to the next one and you say, okay, I represent an item in the bucket. Blah. You see the next one, I represent an item in the bucket. Blah. And you go, because those were your instructions. For every item in the bucket, do this. I didn't say anything about look at what the item in the bucket is and do something based on that. I just said care about the number of items in the bucket. So if I run this, you can see it prints it out 3 times, exactly like what we thought it would do, because there are 3 items in here. And if you add, I can add a 1 and a Toyota and another apple. So now there's 3 more items in the list. So it prints 6 times because there's 6 things total in this list. It doesn't matter what's in there. So then if instead of saying print for every item in the bucket, say this thing, this explicit thing I'm telling you to say, if instead I said to print every item. So it's like you're going through for every item in this bucket. I want you to just go and look at, tell me what it is, print out what that item is. And so it's looking in the bucket, it's saying, okay, well, the first one is an apple. And then the next one is an apple. The next one is an orange. The next one is a number 1. The next one is a Toyota. The next one is an apple. And you can see it comes out in that order. An apple is the first one to an apple. An apple to the second one is an apple. Orange is the third. The number 1 is the fourth. So now I've asked you to care about what the item is and not necessarily just how many there were. So now you're telling me what the item is, and I could tell you at the same time to, you can print multiple things. I could tell you to tell me the item, what it is, and then also tell me this is an item in the bucket. So this is, now you're printing, it's just the comma is separating the string here. Anything between quotes, any text between quotes like this is a string, at least at the level that we're discussing. This is a string as far as you need to care about. I hate it when people say this stuff like that. You can have F strings that get a little fancier, and there are some times, I guess, when these quotes, you can escape items from quote. There are times it gets a little bit more complicated, but for the most part, almost always, text between a string or text between quotes, single or double, is a string. And so right here, we're printing the variable every time, or every item, and then next to it, the string. This is an item in the bucket. So it should run through the list and print like apple, and then the next thing, this is an item in the bucket. And then apple, this is an item in the bucket. Orange, this is an item in the bucket. 1, this is an item in the bucket. I'm glad it actually worked. It would be kind of, that would stink if it didn't work. That's about it. We'll go for round 3 eventually. Good luck.